Hey there, thanks for tuning in. If you want to stay ahead of the curve on breaking developments and in-depth analysis, make sure to follow S News. Support us by subscribing, liking, and dropping a comment below. Your engagement really helps us keep bringing you these important stories. Israeli intelligence officials quietly admitted that the uranium stored at Fordow and Nathan's Messages survived recent United States airstrikes. This admission, first reported by the New York Times, hit like a thunderclap. Back in Washington, former President Donald Trump framed those strikes as a decisive blow that crippled Iran's nuclear ambitions. However, if the 60% enriched uranium remains intact, the strikes haven't stopped Iran's immediate potential. Enriching uranium from 60% to the weapons-grade threshold of 90% is a technical leap, not just a step. This harsh reality is why security planners from Tel Aviv to Riyadh are recalibrating their risk assessments tonight.
Enriching uranium from 60% up to weapons grade isn't just a routine step, it's a serious technical leap. That's why everyone from Tel Aviv to Riyadh is rethinking their security plans right now.
Layers on top of this revelation come from Yedioth Ahronoth, an Israeli daily with direct contacts in the Pentagon's Middle East offices. According to leaked Defense Department cables, Iran's response to the United States raids was much bolder than Washington initially admitted. We now know that Iran launched 14 precision missiles at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the largest United States military installation in the Gulf. For context, 14 is the exact number of massive GBU-57 bunker-buster bombs the United States dropped on Fordow during the raid. Iran matched that count to send a clear message.
We can retaliate against any strike, including on targets you thought were untouchable.
Publicly, United States Central Command initially claimed all incoming rounds were intercepted, except for one stray missile that supposedly crashed harmlessly into the desert sands. Satellite images now prove otherwise. That single missile struck and destroyed a radar dome valued at $80 million back in 2016. Pentagon sources only acknowledged the damage after commercial analysts posted before and after images online. Why is losing just one radar so big? Because defenses at Al Udeid were already on high alert. Iranians sent warnings hours before the strikes through back channels, testing if the Patriot missile battery was still effective. Leaders must wonder how the base would handle a saturation attack with no warning at all. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei amplified this point on X, formerly Twitter, boasting that Iran can strike vital United States sites across the region whenever it wants. This wasn't bombastic rhetoric. It aligns with the Revolutionary Guard's evolving doctrine of using short and medium-range precision missiles to threaten United States logistics hubs. Think fuel depots, ammo caches, command centers, and soft spots that keep a modern air campaign running. When those go dark, even the world's most advanced aircraft become museum pieces.
When you lose those logistics hubs, fuel, ammo, command centers, you're not just losing hardware. You're risking the whole operation. That's what keeps planners up at night.
All this leaves the United States in a strategic bind. Trump stopped the bombing after just one night, but his advisors had already drafted follow-up targets that extended all the way to Iran's command networks.
Why the halt? Well, sources say the real concern wasn't American casualties, but rather the risk of Iranian retaliation against Gulf oil infrastructure. That's what drove the calculus. And let's not forget, the United States has only about 1/4 of the Patriot missile analysts it actually believes are needed for a prolonged regional firefight. Replacing those interceptors takes months, not days, especially since the production lines are already stretched thin supporting Ukraine and Taiwan. So in other words, Washington has come to fully realize its vulnerabilities, just as Iran has shown it can exploit them.
Enter Benjamin Netanyahu, who, according to the Wall Street Journal, sat down with Trump in the Oval Office's final meeting and got what diplomats are calling pre-approval. If Israeli censors pick up Iran reshaping its bomb program, especially if there's an attempt to retrieve 60% uranium deeper under Fordow, Jerusalem will strike, and it won't inform the White House first.
Trump, the report says, offered zero pushback. Diplomats are saying Israel now has a blank check to act whenever its red lines are crossed. This commitment, honestly, is a game changer. For years, Washington tried to discourage unilateral Israeli action, worried it would pull U.S. forces into a wider conflict. Now, at least from Tel Aviv's perspective, the gloves are off.
Former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant confirmed this new stance in an open letter to Khamenei, saying, "I know your schedules and plans, and I will translate that intelligence."
This isn't just a routine sword threat. It means Israel has gathered precise human and technical intelligence on Iran's decision-makers and is ready to destroy their infrastructure, nuclear or otherwise, whenever it chooses.
From Tehran's perspective, the risks right now couldn't be higher. The strikes on Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan have shown that even heavily fortified caves are no longer invincible.
At the same time, Washington's later cancelled raids suggest some caution, maybe even a bit of fatigue, in continuing the air campaign. Iranian planners seem pretty confident that their arsenal of mobile missiles and drones on the roads, plus the threat of mining the Strait of Hormuz, is enough to deter any ongoing attack.
Followers of Khamenei point to the radar hole near Manama as proof that this deterrence is working.
Still, the looming shadow of reimposed sanctions hangs over everything. At the end of the month, the UN Security Council will meet to decide whether to automatically reactivate suspended sanctions, since Tehran is no longer cooperating with International Atomic Energy Agency inspections. Iran has recently cut off surveillance cameras and expelled experienced inspectors, leaving the world kind of clueless about the size of their nuclear stockpile. If the snapback process starts, Iran's already struggling economy, dealing with an 8-digit exchange rate on the rial, could spiral into collapse. And history shows that when economic pressure tightens, Iran's hostility abroad doesn't really ease up. If anything, it often increases, rallying internal unity under the banner of resistance. This puts Saudi Arabia and its Gulf neighbors right in the storm's eye. Riyadh has spent 18 tough months trying to mend ties with Iran, hoping to avoid another drone attack nightmare like Abqaiq.
Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman personally hosted Iranian envoy Abbas Araghchi, signaling a willingness to find political solutions. The Saudis also want a bigger price-stable oil prices, above $80, to fund their massive Vision 2030 projects.
But there's a paradox. If Washington revives the nuclear deal and lifts oil sanctions, Iranian barrels could flood the market, pushing prices down. Bloomberg predicted oil could fall to $40. On the other hand, if war restarts, missiles and drones could disrupt tanker routes through the Strait of Hormuz or Bab al-Mandab, scaring off insurers and driving insurance premiums sky high. Both scenarios would seriously hurt Gulf states' treasuries.
As one analyst jokingly said, Saudi Arabia doesn't want full peace or open war. They want a stable status quo that keeps oil prices steady and Israel off the trigger.
Yet Iran is testing that delicate balance by rearming its Houthi allies in Yemen and quietly mapping minefields in the Strait of Hormuz.
These asymmetric tools give Tehran the option to escalate horizontally, harassing shipping and energy infrastructure without crossing the nuclear threshold that would trigger Israeli or American air raids.
For Gulf kingdoms, that message is chilling. Even if you block dialogue, Iran can still disrupt your vital waterways whenever it wants. So why does Israel insist the conflict is inevitable? Writer Zivi Barel argues in Haaretz that Israel no longer trusts slow sanctions or covert sabotage to contain Tehran.
Mossad's bold raids on hard drives and centrifuge halls have bought time but haven't settled the issue.
Moreover, after last year's unprecedented public protests, Israel's coalition government is hungry for an external rallying cause to divert attention from internal unrest, and Iran's nuclear ambitions fit that bill perfectly.
The murkier Tehran's enrichment data gets, the more Israel's and Washington's and Europe's nerves fray.
So, adding to the complexity here is America's shortfall in interceptor missiles. Patriot battalions are burning through missiles way faster than Raytheon can actually produce them, and I mean each medium-range ballistic missile costs like $4 million. Just one night of multi-layered defenses over Baghdad during the 2020 rocket barrage, well, that used missiles costing more than the entire annual education budget of a mid-sized U.S. state.
With Pentagon planners juggling multiple theaters in Europe and the Pacific, they may be unwilling or even unable to keep enough interceptors on hand for a prolonged conflict in the Gulf. This shortage breeds hesitation in the National Security Council. Launching a campaign without guaranteed airport defenses risks a flood of American casualties and, honestly, a political storm back home. Yet, hesitation also signals weakness. In Tehran's strategic culture, just showing you can stand up to American air power is a victory in itself. Revolutionary Guard leaders still point to Saddam Hussein's army crumbling a month after Desert Storm because it lacked precise retaliation. Iran believes it can trade blow for blow, rallying its ballistic arsenals to force a ceasefire before its industrial base collapses. Whether this confidence is justified Well, that remains debated, but the belief itself drives risk-taking equal to military capabilities. Against this backdrop, Saudi officials are quietly promoting another option, a local multilateral agreement.
Gulf capitals are reaching out directly to Tehran, bypassing both Washington and Tel Aviv. This dialogue, honestly, aims to limit Iran's missile range to 800 kilometers, enough to hit Israel but not Riyadh, and to bind both sides to no naval attacks through the Strait of Hormuz.
Skeptics call it a pipe dream, but, optimists point out that decades of Sunni-Shia proxy wars have drained budgets and public patience. If oil prices drop below $50, budget math alone might just force a deal. Still, time is running out. Iran's breakout window, the time it needs to enrich enough uranium for a bomb core, is about 2 weeks, according to nuclear non-proliferation experts.
Building a usable bomb might take another year, but even the political signal of having a primitive bomb untested would overnight change Middle East deterrence. Israel insists it will never allow that day to dawn.
So what's next?
First, snapback sanctions get triggered.
Iran violently pushes back through proxies.
The United States responds proportionally and a cycle of tit-for-tat continues with no clear end.
Second, the Pentagon reveals excavations at Fordow, pushing Israel to launch preemptive raids with bunker-busting bombs.
Iran openly targets those sites, prompting Washington to deploy aircraft for a broader campaign.
Third, a secret Saudi-Iranian deal slows time, weakens markets, and diplomatically isolates Israel, at least temporarily.
Fourth, an economic collapse inside Iran sparks mass protests, diverting the regime from nuclear aims.
A slight but not impossible pivot.
Every path is full of what-ifs.
A navigational mistake in the Strait could sink a giant oil tanker and shift global opinion overnight.
A cyber attack on water desalination plants could ignite Gulf public fury.
Israeli internal politics might speed up timelines if Netanyahu's coalition feels cornered.
And United States election cycles always loom. No administration wants a new Middle East war in an election year, but crises rarely respect calendars.
On this chessboard, one thing is crystal clear. Deterrence in the Gulf in the 21st century isn't a one-sided American hammer anymore.
It's a complex web of missile wars, economic power, cyber, and information.
Washington can still bring overwhelming force, but the cost of ongoing operations against an enemy who can respond across multiple domains is rising faster than budgets and political will.
Meanwhile, Israel sizes up threat matrices with existential stakes.
Saudi Arabia hopes to delay the next showdown long enough to diversify its economy.
Iran, battered but unbowed, sees nuclear deterrence as the ultimate insurance policy against regime change.
As these players maneuver, remember, no breakthrough, no sanctions, no covert strike happens in a vacuum. Every public move is mirrored by secret cables. Every threat sent through quiet back channels. Every missile test booked on a reserved flight.